The doors stay closed. The big opportunities, they just keep landing on someone else's desk. You're sitting across from people who smile, but notice how they never, ever lean in. You're watching a colleague who is maybe half as competent as you snag the exact promotion you sweat blood for. Your emails go unanswered. You keep hitting this invisible, suffocating barrier despite doing literally everything by the book. Here is the brutal reality happening right under your nose. Power has already chosen sides, and it didn't choose you.
You work harder, you speak louder, you try to force the outcome with pure, exhausted effort. But the room just feels smaller than it should, doesn't it? And that gap is only widening. Look, most men never notice this pattern until the damage is permanent. They tell themselves, oh, it's just corporate politics, or it's a bad quarter, or blame a toxic manager. They treat these moments of rejection as random bad luck or background noise. That is a fatal psychological mistake. Because while you are ignoring the game, someone else is actively playing it against you. These aren't random events. This is the opening move of a cold, invisible contest. Something much deeper is already in motion.
So you really have to ask yourself, why did power choose them instead of you? Right now, you are flying blind to the ancient, unspoken forces that dictate your daily life. You're missing the signals entirely, walking into rooms where the actual decisions were made way before you even crossed the threshold. Okay, let's dive into this explainer and rip away that blindfold.
Section 1. The invisible game of power.
We absolutely need to deconstruct this illusion you've been fed since day one. Power is not just a corner office. It's not a bank balance that lets a guy reshape the lives of strangers. What do you think of as ordinary life, that mundane 9-to-5 grind, is actually an unseen game operating right in front of you. History is literally littered with men who chased loud power, right? Kings who burned cities for territory, executives who crush competitors and call it strategy. Just think of the new VP who marches in, fires 2 people just to assert dominance, and then finds his entire department quietly sabotaging him within a month. This loud version operates on a drowning hunger, and it leaves bodies behind. Real power, though, it's the invisible hand. Real power is the ability to move other people without them ever noticing the hand that pushes. It's that quiet, undeniable force that makes cooperation feel entirely voluntary, seamlessly bending the environment to your will.
Section 2. The illusion of loud control. You see, that old hunger for domination never actually left. It's simply put on a better suit. Today, the modern executive's drive for obvious control in boardrooms and group chats is just that ancient destructive drive in disguise. Men reach for absolute control because the alternative feels like drowning. But pushing too hard? It kills your influence on contact. The danger comes from both sides. And so the crucial point is exactly what Malcolm X understood when he observed that absolute power corrupts, but absolute powerlessness corrupts even more. This second form of corruption is much quieter, and it is far more common in the modern world. How does absolute powerlessness manifest in your daily life? Well, it turns men incredibly bitter. It makes them intensely passive-aggressive. Think of the guy who constantly complains at the water cooler but never speaks up in the actual meeting. It teaches men to hide a burning resentment behind sarcastic jokes and cowardly silence. It's a deeply poisonous state that just eats away at a man's potential from the inside out.
Section 3. Defeating the internal enemy.
The path out of that poison starts entirely inside, but most young men stay trapped by their first and greatest enemy, which is themselves. Self-absorption is basically the default human setting. A man sees the world only through his own eyes, assumes everyone else shares his exact view, and expects intense understanding without ever offering a drop of it in return. That destroys his leverage entirely. To break this, you've got to understand what we call the performance. Everyone around you is performing. They are playing desperately constructed roles to hide what they fear and what they quietly crave. Think of the boss who micromanages every detail just to hide a crippling imposter syndrome, or that peer who constantly cracks arrogant jokes to deflect from their own deep insecurity. The more you insist they meet you where you stand, the more they're inevitably going to pull away. Demanding understanding without offering it guarantees your isolation. You must step into another person's specific pressure. You have to feel the terrifying weight they carry, because only by doing this does their surface start to crack, giving you the leverage that the blind men in the room never even see.
To disarm your ego, you have to follow a very precise psychological path. Step 1, watch your behavior under pressure. Don't judge it, just observe it. Notice your desperate urge to control a failing project or that flash of distrust you feel when a colleague succeeds. Step 2, study your failed decisions. Really look for the ugly, repetitive pattern of insecurity operating underneath them. Ask yourself, were you actually being strategic or were you just terrified of looking weak? Step 3 is critical. Journal the raw feelings. Look, emotions rise without your permission. Old anger, old jealousy, old slights. When you don't process this internally, you end up reacting to the wrong target in the real world. The other person feels attacked out of nowhere, and trust instantly dies. Journaling mechanically stops the ego from aggressively defending these unhealed wounds. And finally, step 4. Use distance and humor. When you can literally step back and laugh at your own irrational, knee-jerk reactions, the psychological grip loosens. Your self-love becomes quiet and deeply solid, and that calm, unshakable presence naturally lowers other people's defenses before you even open your mouth.
Section 4. Bypassing external human resistance.
Once you defeat that internal enemy, the second enemy is waiting for you outside. Human resistance. People resist outside influence by raw instinct. They don't want to be managed, and they certainly don't want to be manipulated. If you use obvious force, raw ambition, or direct demands, their instinctual defiance freezes you out entirely. And this brilliantly illustrates the corporate applied analysis. Think about how the multi-billion-dollar fitness industry sells diet pills and treadmills. They target emotion first. They target that desperate hunger for success, for safety, for physical admiration. Let's be brutally honest here. Raw biomechanical logic and health facts have never sold a single treadmill in human history. Logic only comes in later to justify the emotional purchase. Social leverage works exactly the same way. You need a soft, calculated presence. Believing that people should simply help you out of the goodness of their hearts without any exchange is a costly delusion. Force creates immediate defensiveness. Mutual benefit, targeting their unstated emotional needs, is the only reliable social currency that exists.
6. Just 6%. 94% of your existence is already written by forces you can't even touch. Your birth, your family, your genetics, large macroeconomic circumstances, it is all entirely outside your reach. A maximum of only 4 to 6% of your life is actually within your direct control. That is the tiny, razor-thin margin where the real contest happens. And if you let your emotions dictate that margin, you are surrendering the only weapon you have. Mastering this tiny fraction through relentless emotional discipline is the single, solitary way to expand your power in a world designed to crush you.
Section 5. The corruption of powerlessness.
So what happens if you ignore that tiny margin? A terrifying, creeping decay sets in. This is the inescapable fate of the naive man who stays blind and just waits for the world to magically adjust to his unspoken demands. The consequences rise step by agonizing step. First, opportunities simply dry up, the promotions stop, the invites stop. People choose the guy who already understands the unspoken rules of the room. Second, relationships fundamentally tilt against him. Romantic partners and business colleagues possess a sixth sense for a lack of leverage. When they sense it, they stop investing and start pulling away. Third, deep resentment builds and poisons absolutely everything. The man starts to honestly believe the world is simply unfair and rigged against his unique brilliance. His career irreversibly plateaus, his friendships painfully thin out. The powerless man shrinks into himself, becoming small, unpredictable, dangerous, and profoundly isolated.
Who exactly benefits when young men stay blind to these forces? The institutions, the corporations, the highly skilled manipulators who understand the game. They move seamlessly through the exact same rooms, silently harvesting the cooperation of the blind. When you remain self-absorbed and easily triggered by your own ego, you are perfectly positioned to be turned into a predictable, compliant worker. You become an easy, emotional customer. You are literally farmed for your physical and mental energy by those who understand emotional undercurrents, all while you're left wondering why you always feel so exhausted and unrewarded.
Section 6. 3 inevitable futures.
You need to understand this coldly. Neutral ground does not exist. You cannot opt out of this game. Every single person is already moving toward one of 3 final, inescapable destinations. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the contrast, because the mechanics dictate exactly where this ends. Path 1 is the ignorant path. You continue to treat the social and psychological signals as background noise. You complain. Your margin of control stays tiny, and your life violently narrows, shrinks, and leaves you bitter. Path 2 is the cooperative path. You do the brutal internal work. Self-awareness grows. You learn to read the room and offer mutual benefit. Here, power arrives freely as cooperation, not as bloody conquest. Then there's Path 3, the dark path. You learn the psychological techniques of manipulation, but you skip the internal self-mastery. You learn to read and exploit others, but remain completely blind to your own driving insecurities. You might see explosive short-term gains, for sure, But eventually, long-term trust completely collapses. The hunger for control becomes utterly unsustainable, and you are left presiding over a kingdom of ashes.
Power given freely lasts far longer than power taken by force. Understanding this invisible game early is a matter of absolute professional and social survival. It is the sole dividing line that separates the men who actively shape the rooms they enter from the naive, blind men who merely fill the spaces shaped by others. The difference isn't talent. The difference is the sheer willingness to fight the internal enemy first, silently, without ever announcing the fight to the world.
Each path rearranges the fundamental balance of power around you. None of them are neutral. The truly chilling part of this game is how early the choice is made for you if you aren't paying attention. By the time the destructive pattern is obvious, the cost has already compounded for years. So look at your life, your career, and your relationships right now. Which path is already under your feet?